And welcome back to our America Tonight Town Hall. We're continuing our discussion about Syria and the crisis there and what the United States should do about it, if anything. Joining us now on the panel is Congressman Steve Horsford from Nevada. As well with us is Colonel Cedric Layton, who retired of the U.S. Air Force. And we appreciate both of you being here. Congressman, I want to start with you and talk a little bit about, because you do have a significant military population within your community, and we know that the President tonight made a particular statement, a shout-out, as it were, on pinprick strikes and what the military can do. What did you hear in the President's comments that might or might not sway your community and your own vote, because you hadn't made a decision?
Well, as you indicate, I was undecided. I remain undecided on the strike itself, but I am very pleased and optimistic, and I commend the President for delaying a vote to allow the new approach with Syria turning over the chemical weapons and signing on to the Chemical Weapons Convention language, because ultimately that's the larger objective of securing and eliminating chemical weapons that we all should be striving to achieve.
Colonel, that is a difficult task, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, when you look at it from a diplomatic standpoint, that is, of course, the preferred solution, even for military people. You don't want to go in there and actually have to destroy the chemical weapons, because it is very difficult to do so if you don't have boots on the ground. And everybody says we don't want to have boots on the ground in Syria, at least not American boots. So you have to look at it in a very multifaceted approach, because when you have chemical weapons, they are very difficult to destroy. Pinprick strikes are not going to work exactly against the munitions themselves, because you risk spreading the sarin gas, any other nerve agents like VX or anything like that. That becomes very, very dangerous, because you don't have the munitions available yet to do that. Now, in the future, there will probably be some munitions that can handle that kind of an attack, but we're not there yet in terms of weaponry, in terms of actually developing that kind of a weapons system. So that limits U.S. options in this case.
But, Colonel, how do you reconcile President Obama saying it would not be a pinprick strike with Secretary of State Kerry saying the strike would be unbelievably small?
Well, Antonio, you can't reconcile those two. It's impossible logically to reconcile those. And the reason is that when the military goes in and actually undertakes a mission of this type, they can be precise, but you cannot be small if you want to be effective. You can be precise by going after a specific target set, but you cannot go after a target set that is unimportant. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to achieve the greatest effect for the smallest expenditure of munition. And that's, I think, what they're trying to refer to, but the language that was used was such that it is logically incompatible.
We have a question from the audience from Oriana, who's from Venezuela, and she's a student at George Washington University.
Thank you. I definitely agree that at least threatening actions must be taken in order to stop the atrocities in Syria. However, my question is regarding this proposed unilateral attacks from the U.S. and how the world would view it. The President mentioned that our reputation and our credibility is at stake here. So to what extent is this attack, to what extent will it improve our reputation in the international community?
Well, I'm hopeful that the alternative will be achieved, which is to allow Syria to turn over the chemical weapons and to turn it over to the international community, to allow the international community to go in and secure those facilities so that we can avoid a strike from occurring. What the President talked about tonight is that in the event that they do not agree, or we are not able to get that in place in a near term, then the strike is still on the table. And that strike would be limited but focused. My understanding, based on some of the briefings that I've been in, is it would target some of the military installations specifically, and that would, degrade the capacity of the Assad regime from using chemical weapons any further against their own people.
One of the difficulties I think that you see, when you look at U.S. military action, the President has tried very hard to avoid a unilateral action on the part of the U.S. from a military perspective. He looks at, for example, the experience with the Iraq War as being a negative experience for the United States, and I think most people around the world would probably agree with that. The problem that you have, though, is that sometimes, in order to achieve national objectives, you have to have the capacity to go it alone. And what I read from the President's statements and from the various efforts that other members of the administration are undertaking is an effort to make it clear that we want to do diplomatic actions, we want to conduct diplomatic efforts, but we are ready to do other things, military things in this case, to go after the targets that we believe are important to go after to actually eliminate the problem on an international basis. But from an international perspective, we have to be very careful with that because there's always the risk of negative approach. So I think what they want to do is exhaust every option before we get to that point.
Out here in the audience with us is one of our contributors from earlier in the program, Roland Martin, also a columnist and great contributor on all of these issues. Can you talk a little bit about the President's credibility and legacy through the course? Is Syria going to be the thing that he is remembered for?
First of all, you look at polling data, his numbers have dropped when it comes to confidence in him, when it comes to foreign policy. That was always one of his strengths for the last 5 years. I don't necessarily believe Syria somehow is going to be the defining point when it comes to his legacy, because if you look at it from a military standpoint, you look at what has happened in Iraq, troops being able to come home, him making a clear declaration, and when our troops are coming home from Afghanistan. But what I do think was being overlooked is the fact that he's putting Congress on the spot to say, look, you could have put this all on me, I could have made the decision, but he's forcing them to have this dialogue as well. I think a lot of members of Congress, frankly, are upset they have to defend or a decision or even make this decision because it could have been very easy for him to make a decision. They could sit there and say, oh, great call or bad call, it had no consequence. Now they have some skin in the game. So I think more members of Congress probably are happy with the Russia situation as opposed to just the President.
What do you think, Congressman?
Yeah, I'm pleased that the President chose to come to Congress because it's made this more of an open, transparent, and deliberative process than it would have been otherwise. The fact that we're even having this debate tonight is because the President chose to come to Congress. Are there some members who, would have preferred not to be in this position? Yes, but those are the same members who don't see a partnership between Congress and the presidency in leading this country. We have 3 branches of government, and we have to work together to make these very difficult decisions. I'm a new member, and this is a tough decision.
And you are a Democrat.
Democrat, but I have not, and while I support the President and I trust his leadership, I still have to make an independent judgment based on my constituents and the best interests as I see it for the United States as well.
And one of the big questions